My name is Margaret Miller, and if you walked past my house on 12th Avenue in Denver, you'd think I was the picture of a peaceful retirement. My Victorian home has a wraparound porch that I paint every 3 years, and my rose bushes are the envy of the neighborhood. But inside these walls, the silence is so heavy it sometimes feels like a physical weight on my chest. I remember when this house was a battlefield of laughter, slamming doors, and the constant smell of burnt toast and pine cleaner. I raised 3 children here, Jason, Chloe, and Sam. I poured every ounce of my soul, every cent of my teacher's salary, and every prayer I had into them. I thought that by giving them roots, I was giving them wings. I just didn't realize they would use those wings to fly so far away that they'd forget where they started. It's a Tuesday morning, and the Denver sun is cutting through the thin mountain air, hitting the dust motes dancing in my living room. I'm sitting in my favorite wingback chair, the one where I used to read them Goodnight Moon. My phone is sitting on the side table. It's a sleek, modern smartphone that Jason sent me 3 years ago for Christmas. He didn't come to visit, of course. He just had it shipped from an Amazon warehouse with a digital gift receipt that read, "Hope this helps you stay connected. Love, Jason." I pick it up. The screen is cold. I scroll through my call log. It's a sea of outgoing calls. Mom calling, the screen must have said on their ends. Most of them went to voicemail. "Hi Jason, it's Mom. I saw on the news that there was a big tech conference in San Francisco. I hope you're eating well. Give the kids a hug for me. Call me when you can." Click. "Hi Chloe, honey. I saw your Instagram post from the beach in Miami. You look beautiful, but you look a little thin. Are you getting enough sleep? I found that old blue sweater you liked in the attic. Do you want me to mail it? Love you." No response. "Sam, it's just Mom. I know real estate in Chicago is crazy right now, but I haven't heard from you in 3 months. I'm having a little trouble with the water heater. Do you remember the name of that plumber your father used to trust? Anyway, just checking in." I put the phone back down. The water heater is fine. I just wanted to hear his voice. I wanted him to tell me a joke or complain about the traffic on I-90. I wanted to feel like I still mattered in the ecosystem of their lives. Living in Denver, you get used to the seasons changing quickly. One day it's 70 degrees and the next a blizzard is rolling off the Rockies. My life feels like it's stuck in a permanent winter. I go to the King Soopers grocery store and I buy a single chicken breast, 1 potato, and a small bunch of asparagus. The cashier, a young girl with a nose ring and a kind smile, asks, "Just you today, Mrs. Miller?" "Just me, Sarah," I say, forced to smile. The kids are so busy. Jason's company just went public, you know. And Chloe is, well, she's a star on the internet. I lie for them. I lie to the cashier. I lie to my friends at the garden club, and I lie to myself. I tell everyone they are successful and driven. I don't tell them that I spent my last birthday eating a frozen Marie Callender's pot pie alone while watching reruns of Jeopardy. I don't tell them that when I fell in the shower last month and bruised my hip, I laid on the cold tile for 20 minutes, wondering if this was how it would end, with me staring at the bathroom ceiling while my children argued over a boardroom table 1,000 miles away. Today, however, the silence feels different. There's a dull ache in my side that hasn't gone away for weeks. I've been ignoring it, thinking it was just the price of getting older, the rust of a body that's seen 72 winters. But this morning, the pain is sharp like a needle made of ice. I look at the framed photos on the mantel. There's Jason at his graduation from CU Boulder. There's Chloe at her dance recital, teeth missing, eyes bright with ambition. There's Sam, my baby, holding a trophy from a Little League game at Washington Park. They look like they love me in those photos. They are leaning into me, their hands tucked into mine. Where did those children go? When did I become a ghost to the people I gave life to? In American culture, we celebrate independence. We tell our children to go out, conquer the world, make a name for themselves, and hustle. We've traded the front porch for the home office. We've traded Sunday dinner for a scheduled Zoom call that always gets moved. My children are the embodiment of the American dream, but they are starving for something they can't name, and I am starving for the scraps of their time. I decide then, I won't call them today. I won't leave a message that will be deleted before it's even finished playing. I pick up the yellow pages. Yes, I still keep a physical copy, and I look under attorneys. If they won't hear my voice in life, they will have to hear it in my absence. I think of Mr. Harrison. He was a friend of my late husband, Arthur. He's a downtown lawyer, the kind with a mahogany desk and a view of the state Capitol dome. As I get ready to leave, I catch my reflection in the hallway mirror. My hair is silver now, and the wrinkles around my eyes are maps of every time I laughed at their jokes, and every night I stayed up waiting for them to come home from prom. I look like a mother, but do I have children if they don't acknowledge I exist? I grab my coat, the heavy one, because the Denver wind is starting to howl, and I walk out the door. I don't know it yet, but this is the first day of the end of my life, and the first day of the lesson my children desperately need to learn. I'm going to see a lawyer, not to sue them and not to beg. I'm going to make sure that when the lawyer knocks on their door, it's the only time they'll finally be forced to listen to the woman who gave them everything, only to be left with nothing but the sound of the wind against the window pane. The elevator ride up to Mr. Harrison's office was smooth, a stark contrast to the pounding in my chest. His office was located in one of those tall, glass and steel buildings on 17th Street, the Wall Street of the West. As I stepped out, I felt out of place in my old wool coat and sensible shoes, surrounded by young professionals in tailored suits, their eyes glued to their iPhones, walking with a frantic sense of purpose. They looked just like my children. Margaret Miller. As I live and breathe, Edward Harrison said, stepping out from behind a massive mahogany desk. He was a man of 80 now, but his eyes were still as sharp as a hawk's. He had been my husband Arthur's best friend. He knew the history of our family. He had even been at the hospital when Sam was born. "Hello, Edward," I said, my voice trembling slightly as I sat in the plush leather chair. He looked at me for a long moment, bypassing the pleasantries. "They haven't been home, have they?" "Not for a long time." I looked down at my hands. "Jason says the Silicon Valley cycle is relentless. Chloe has a brand to maintain. And Sam says Chicago is just too far to fly for a weekend." Edward sighed, a sound of pure frustration. "They are ungrateful, Margaret. There's no other word for it. Arthur would be heartbroken." "I didn't come here to complain, Edward," I said, pulling a small, leather-bound ledger from my purse. "I came because I'm tired. I'm tired of being a secret benefactor. I'm tired of sending love into a vacuum. In American families like mine, we have a tradition of helping out. Over the last 15 years, I had done more than just help. When Jason's first startup was failing, I took out a second mortgage on the house to give him the capital he needed. He never paid it back. He forgot it was a loan. When Chloe wanted to move to Miami to start her career, I paid her rent for 2 years. When Sam went through that messy divorce, I was the one who paid the legal fees. But as soon as they were back on their feet, the calls stopped. The thank you notes became text messages, then emojis, then nothing. "I want to change my will," I said firmly. "But I want to do it in a way they won't expect." I spent the next 2 hours with Edward, going over my assets. Most people, including my children, thought I was just a retired teacher living on a modest pension. They didn't know about the land Arthur had bought in the mountains decades ago that was now worth millions. They didn't know about the stocks I had quietly managed. "I want to set up a trust," I explained, "the Miller Legacy Foundation. Everything goes to the Denver Inner City Teachers Fund and the local hospice care center. Every cent." Edward nodded, scribbling notes. "And what about the children? You have to leave them something, Margaret, or they might contest it based on undue influence or some other legal nonsense." "Oh, I am leaving them something," I said, and for the first time in months, I felt a spark of something other than sadness. "I'm leaving them the truth." I left the office and drove to a small storage unit I had rented near Cherry Creek. Inside were 3 large plastic bins, one for each of them. For years, I had been a collector of their neglect. I opened Jason's bin. Inside were 24 envelopes. These were the birthday cards I had sent him every year, containing a handwritten letter and a $100 bill. I knew they were here because 5 years ago I had visited his home in San Francisco unannounced. I found his junk drawer in the kitchen. There, among old batteries and takeout menus, were 3 of my cards unopened. He hadn't even bothered to take the money. He just didn't care enough to read my words. I had taken them back when he wasn't looking. Over the years, I had done the same with Chloe and Sam. Every time I visited and saw my letters tossed aside like trash, I took them back. I was saving them for this moment. I spent the rest of the afternoon at my kitchen table in Capitol Hill. The sun began to set, casting long, orange shadows across the hardwood floors. I had 3 boxes, nice, sturdy cardboard boxes from the UPS store. Into Jason's box, I put his unopened cards. I also added the deed to the house he had borrowed money against. I added a photo of him from 1995, sitting on my lap, promising he'd never leave me. Into Chloe's box, I put the letters I wrote her during her first year of college when she was homesick and crying every night. I had saved her replies from back then. Replies that said, "Mom, you're my best friend. I don't know what I'd do without you." I wanted her to see the girl she used to be before she became a brand. Into Sam's box, I put his old baseball glove and the receipts for his legal fees. But more importantly, I put a thumb drive. On that drive was a recording I had made a year ago, on a night when I was feeling particularly lonely. It wasn't a mean recording. It was just me talking about my day, describing the way the snow looked on the trees, and telling him that I made his favorite pot roast, but ended up giving it to the neighbor because I couldn't finish it alone. This is the American tragedy, I thought. We build these huge lives, these platforms, these empires, and we forget the people who laid the first brick. We treat our parents like an old software update, something that was useful once, but is now just a glitch in the system. I felt a sharp pain in my side again, more intense this time. I gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles turning white. I knew I didn't have much time left. The doctor's appointment I had scheduled for the next morning would likely confirm what I already felt in my bones. I finished packing the boxes and taped them shut. I wrote their names on the top in my best teacher's cursive. Jason, Chloe, Sam. I called Edward Harrison one last time. Edward, the boxes are ready. I'm going to leave them in the front hallway. When the time comes, and I think it will be soon, I want you to deliver them personally. Don't mail them. Don't send a courier. I want you to knock on their doors. I want them to have to look a human being in the eye when they receive their inheritance. I'll do it, Margaret, Edward said softly. You have my word. That night, I lay in bed and listened to the sounds of Denver. The distant siren of an ambulance, the hum of the light rail, the wind whistling through the eaves of my old Victorian. I wasn't afraid. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt like a preparation. I had spent my life being a good mother. I had been patient, I had been quiet, and I had been invisible. But Margaret Miller was done being invisible. Tomorrow I would see the doctor, and in a few months my children would finally get a visit from a lawyer. They think they are waiting for a windfall. They think that eventually they will inherit the house and the money, and that will be the end of their mother problem. They have no idea that the most expensive thing they are about to receive is the weight of their own regret. The fluorescent lights of the doctor's office in Cherry Creek were unforgiving. They didn't care about my history or the Victorian house I had spent 40 years turning into a home. Dr. Aris looked at me over his spectacles with a look that doctors only give when they are about to change someone's world forever. Margaret, he said softly, clicking his pen. The scans confirmed what we suspected. It's advanced. Stage 4. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. In fact, I felt a strange sense of relief. It was as if the universe was finally matching my physical state to the emotional hollowness I had been living with for years. How long? I asked. 6 months, maybe. With aggressive treatment, we might stretch it to a year, but the quality of life, He trailed off. I don't want the year, I said, my voice firmer than I expected. I want the 6 months. I want to be in my garden, not in a hospital bed hooked up to machines that beep while no one sits in the visitor's chair. As I drove home, I passed through Washington Park. I saw young mothers pushing strollers, their faces glowing with that exhausted, beautiful love. I saw grown men playing frisbee with their dogs. I wondered which of those children would grow up to ignore their mother's calls. I wondered which of those mothers would end up like me, a ghost in her own life. When I got home, I did something I hadn't done in years. I didn't check my phone to see if Jason, Chloe, or Sam had called. I didn't care. I walked straight to the kitchen, poured a glass of lemonade, and went into my backyard. In America, we are obsessed with doing. We are obsessed with the next promotion, the better car, the bigger house. But as I sat among my hydrangeas, I realized that the only thing that truly matters is being. My children were so busy doing that they had forgotten how to be with the woman who gave them their very existence. I spent the next 3 months in a state of quiet rebellion. I stopped pretending. When a neighbor asked how Jason was doing in San Francisco, I didn't say he's doing great anymore. I said I wouldn't know. We haven't spoken in months. The look of shock on their faces was almost worth the pain. I began to spend my inheritance while I was still alive, not on myself, but on the world around me. I hired a local teenager, a boy named Leo, who lived down the street and worked 3 jobs to help his mom, to help me in the garden. Mrs. Miller, Leo asked one afternoon as we were planting winter pansies, why don't your kids help you with this? My mom says you have 3. They live far away, Leo, I said, wiping dirt from my hands. They have very important lives. No life is more important than your mom, Leo said, shaking his head with the simple wisdom of a boy who hadn't been corrupted by the hustle yet. I looked at him and realized that this stranger's son was giving me more companionship than my own flesh and blood. That day, I went inside and called Edward Harrison. Edward, I said, I want to add a clause. I want to set aside a scholarship fund specifically for Leo, and I want to make sure the house isn't sold to a developer. I want it to become Margaret's house, a respite for single mothers who need a week of peace. You're stripping them of everything, Margaret, Edward warned. They will be furious. They can't be furious about losing something they never valued, I replied. As the leaves in Denver turned from vibrant green to gold and fiery red, my strength began to wane. The needle of ice in my side was now a constant, dull throb, but my mind was clearer than ever. I started writing letters, not the ones I had already packed in the boxes, but new ones. These weren't for the children, they were for me. I wrote down the memories I wanted to keep, the ones that didn't involve their neglect. I remembered Jason's first steps on the rug in the living room. I remembered Chloe's obsession with the Little Mermaid, and how I stayed up until 2 a.m. sewing her costume. I remembered Sam's smell when he was a baby, like milk and sunshine. I realized that my love for them was a separate entity from their treatment of me. I could love the children they were while holding the adults they became accountable. One evening, the phone actually rang. It was Chloe. My heart did a traitorous little leap. Mom, she said. She sounded distracted. I could hear the honking of Miami traffic in the background. Hello, Chloe. Hey, listen, I'm doing this family tradition series for my followers, and I couldn't remember. What was that recipe for the apple pie you used to make? The one with the crumbly top? Can you text it to me? Also, I might not make it for Christmas this year. My agency is throwing a huge gala in St. Bart's, and I really need to be there for the networking. I looked at the boxes in the hallway. I looked at the medicine bottles on my counter. The recipe is in your head, Chloe, I said quietly, if you cared to remember it. And don't worry about Christmas. I've already made other plans. Wait, what plans? You always stay home. I'm going somewhere else this year, I said. It wasn't a lie. I was going to a place where I wouldn't be ignored. Okay, cool. Well, text me that recipe. Love you, bye. Click. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't notice the rasp in my breath. She wanted a prop for her brand. That was the last time I spoke to any of them. I spent my final weeks in the care of a wonderful hospice nurse named Elena. We sat on the porch and watched the first snow of the season dust the peaks of the Rockies. I told her about my life. I told her about Arthur. I told her about the boxes. "They will regret it," Elena said, tucking a blanket around my legs. "In this country, we think we can always fix things later. We think there's always more time. But time is the only thing you can't buy back with a credit card or a fancy job title." I closed my eyes and felt the cold Denver air on my face. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a teacher, and I was about to give my children the most important lesson of their lives. I passed away on a quiet Tuesday in December. There was no one in the house but Elena and the ghost of the woman I used to be. 2 days later, Edward Harrison stood in my hallway, looking at the 3 boxes. He picked up his briefcase, straightened his tie, and headed toward the airport. The lesson was about to begin. The glass towers of San Francisco shimmered in the morning light, reflecting the restless energy of a city built on the promise of the future. Jason Miller sat in his corner office, 60 floors above the ground. To the world, he was a titan of industry, a man who had successfully navigated the cutthroat waters of Silicon Valley. His desk was cluttered with awards, prototypes of his latest tech, and 3 different computer monitors that blinked with real-time data. He was in the middle of a high-stakes conference call when his assistant's voice crackled over the intercom. "Jason, there's a gentleman here to see you." "An Edward Harrison? He says he's an attorney from Denver." Jason frowned, muttering a "hold on" to the investors on the line. "Harrison? Tell him to schedule an appointment through my secretary. I'm in the middle of a Series B funding round." "He says it's about your mother, sir. He says it cannot wait." A cold prickle of annoyance, mixed with a faint, distant dread, moved up Jason's spine. He hadn't called Margaret in 3 weeks. Or was it 4? He'd meant to, but the board meetings had run late, and the time difference was always a hassle. He sighed, told his investors he had an emergency, and stood up as the heavy oak doors opened. Edward Harrison did not look like a man from the world of tech. He looked like the past. He was dressed in a charcoal wool suit that smelled faintly of old books and Denver pine. In his arms, he carried a plain cardboard box, taped shut, with Jason written on it in a handwriting that Jason recognized instantly. It was the same handwriting that had appeared on every lunch note, every birthday card, and every thinking of you letter he had ignored for a decade. "Mr. Harrison," Jason said, extending a hand. "Is something wrong with Mom? Did she have another fall? If she needs a private nurse, just send me the bill." Edward didn't take the hand. He simply walked to the expensive Italian leather sofa in the corner and placed the box on the coffee table. He looked around the office, the minimalist art, the view of the Golden Gate Bridge, with a look of profound pity. "Your mother passed away 4 days ago, Jason," Edward said. His voice was low, echoing in the sterile silence of the office. Jason froze. The air seemed to leave the room. "What? Why wasn't I called? Why didn't the hospital?" "There was no hospital," Edward interrupted. "She died in her home, in the bed she shared with your father. She was under hospice care for months. She chose not to tell you because, in her words, they are far too busy with their own lives to be bothered by a dying woman." Jason sank into his chair. I didn't know it was that serious. She said she had a bit of a stomach ache last time we spoke. She didn't want to beg for your time, Jason. She wanted it to be a gift you gave freely. You chose not to." Edward pushed the box toward him. "This is your inheritance. The legal documents regarding the estate will be sent to your legal team tomorrow, but Margaret insisted I deliver this to you personally." Jason looked at the box. His hands trembled as he reached for the tape. He expected a deed. He expected stocks. He expected a check that would help offset the stress of his current business ventures. Instead, when he opened the flaps, he saw a mountain of white and cream envelopes. He picked one up. It was a birthday card from 3 years ago. It was unopened. He picked up another, a graduation card from 5 years ago, unopened. He realized with a sickening thud in his stomach that these were the cards he had tossed into his junk drawer or left on his kitchen counter, assuming they were just Mom being Mom. "She took them back," Edward said, watching Jason's face turn pale. "Every time she visited you, those rare times you let her stay in your guest room for 48 hours, she saw where you put her love. She saw them in the trash, in the junk drawer, under stacks of important magazines. So she took them back. She didn't want the money wasted, and she didn't want her heart sitting in a pile of garbage." Jason opened one of the cards. A $100 bill fell out, but it was the letter inside that hit him like a physical blow. "Dear Jason, I know you're working so hard. I'm so proud of the man you've become. I saw your interview in the magazine. You looked a little tired, honey. Please remember that the world won't stop spinning if you take a Saturday off. I'm making your favorite peach cobbler today. I'll freeze a piece for you, just in case you decide to fly home. Love, Mom." He opened another, and another. Each one was a testament to a woman who had been cheering for him from the sidelines while he had forgotten she was even in the stadium. "There's one more thing," Edward said, handing him a legal document. "The house in Denver, the one you were planning to sell to that developer for $3 million, it's gone. She donated it. It's being converted into a home for teachers. And the mountain land, that's now a public park named after your father. You have the cards, Jason. That's what you valued. That's what you kept." As Jason sat in his multi-million-dollar office, surrounded by the success he had sacrificed his mother for, the silence of the room became deafening. He realized he was holding thousands of dollars in cash, but he had never been poorer in his life. 3 hours later, the knock came at a high-end condominium in Miami. Chloe Miller was filming a Get Ready With Me video for her 3 million followers. She was talking about the importance of curating your circle and removing toxic energy while she applied a $300 face cream. When her doorbell rang, she groaned. "Hold on, guys, probably my Postmates," she whispered to the camera. She opened the door to find Edward Harrison. He didn't wait for an invitation. He walked past her, his eyes scanning the vanity, the ring lights, and the racks of designer clothes that had been sent to her for free. "Your mother is dead, Chloe," he said, skipping the preamble. Chloe dropped her phone. The screen cracked, a jagged line running through her own filtered face. "What? No. I just talked to her. I asked for a recipe." "You asked for a prop," Edward corrected. He placed the second box on her marble kitchen island. "She spent her final months watching you live a life of fiction. She wondered why you had time to talk to 3 million strangers, but couldn't find 10 minutes for the woman who taught you how to speak." Chloe opened her box. Inside were the letters she had written as a girl, the ones that said, "I love you, Mommy." But beneath them were printouts of her own Instagram feed. Margaret had circled the dates. December 25th. Photo of Chloe at a party in Aspen. Caption, "Family is everything." Margaret's note on the side. "I spent today at the soup kitchen." Chloe didn't call. May 12th. Mother's Day photo of a bouquet of roses Chloe had posted. Caption, "To the woman who made me who I am." Margaret's note. The roses were a sponsored post. She didn't send them to me. She sent them to her fans. Chloe began to sob, the heavy makeup running down her face in dark streaks. She looked at the letters from her childhood and realized the brand she had built was a hollow shell. She had traded a real mother for a digital following, and now the only person who truly knew her soul was gone. "The jewelry you expected? The heirlooms?" Edward asked. She sold them. She used the money to fund an arts program for kids who actually write letters to their parents. "You have your followers, Chloe. I hope they can comfort you tonight." Edward left without a word, heading for the airport. He had one more stop. Chicago. One more box. One more lesson in the high cost of being too busy for love. The wind in Chicago doesn't just blow, it bites. It cuts through the canyons of the loop with a ferocity that makes everyone walk a little faster, their heads down, their eyes fixed on the pavement. Sam Miller was no different. At 35, he was the youngest of the three, the baby of the family and arguably the one who had stayed the closest to home, at least geographically. But emotionally, he was 1,000 miles away. Sam was standing in the middle of a luxury penthouse on the 40th floor of a new development overlooking Lake Michigan. He was showing the property to a high-profile client, pointing out the floor-to-ceiling windows and the smart home integration. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a call from an unknown Denver area code. He silenced it. Probably a telemarketer, he thought. Or Mom calling to ask about the water heater again. When the showing ended, Sam walked down to the lobby, his mind already on his next commission. That's when he saw him, an older man in a charcoal suit, sitting on a bench near the elevators, looking out of place among the glass and chrome. Sam Miller. Edward Harrison stood up. He didn't look like a lawyer at that moment. He looked like a messenger of doom. Mr. Harrison? What are you doing in Chicago? Sam's voice wavered. Unlike his siblings, Sam was the one who still felt the tug of home the most, even if he spent every waking hour trying to suppress it with work and social climbing. I think you know why I'm here, Sam. Edward led him to a small, quiet seating area near the building's cafe. He placed the third box, the one labeled Sam, on the table between them. Your mother passed away 4 days ago. Sam didn't react like Jason or Chloe. He didn't argue, and he didn't sob immediately. He simply stared at the box. A slow, cold realization washed over him. He remembered the missed calls. He remembered the text he had started to write 3 days ago. Hey, Mom, sorry it's been a while. Things are crazy here. I'll call you Sunday. He had never hit send. Now, there would be no more Sundays. She was sick, wasn't she? Sam whispered. Cancer, Edward said. She knew for 6 months. She spent those 6 months making sure her affairs were in order. She wanted to make sure that the people who actually showed up for her were taken care of. Sam opened the box. It was heavier than the others. On top was his old baseball glove, the leather cracked and dry. Beneath, it was a thick stack of papers, receipts. Every cent Margaret had ever spent on him was documented. The college tuition, the down payment on his first car, the legal fees for his divorce. It was a ledger of a life supported by a mother's sacrifice. But at the bottom of the box was a small, silver thumb drive. She knew you were the one who liked to listen, Edward said. She said you used to sit at her feet and listen to her tell stories about the old Denver for hours. She recorded something for you. Edward left Sam there, in the lobby of a building he didn't own, surrounded by people who didn't know his name. Sam pulled out his laptop, plugged in the drive, and put on his headphones. The sound of a throat clearing filled his ears. Then the sound of a window being opened, the faint chirp of Denver birds in the background, and finally Margaret's voice. She sounded tired, her breath hitching slightly, but her tone was as warm as a Sunday morning. Hi, Sammy. If you're listening to this, I'm probably sitting in the garden with your father now, watching the sun go down over the Rockies. I wanted to tell you a story. Do you remember the blizzard of 2003? The one where the snow was so high we couldn't open the front door? You were so scared. You thought the world was ending. I sat with you all night, Sam. I told you that as long as we were inside these walls, as long as we had each other, the snow didn't matter. I spent my whole life being your walls, Sam. I kept the cold out for you. Sam's breath hitched. He closed his eyes, leaning his forehead against the cold screen of the laptop. But lately, Margaret's voice continued, a hint of sadness creeping in, the walls have been getting thin. I called you 3 months ago, Sam. I didn't want to talk about a plumber. I wanted to tell you that I was scared. I wanted you to tell me that it was going to be okay, the way I told you during the blizzard. But you didn't answer. And I realized that I had raised you to be so independent, so focused on your territory, that you forgot that even the strongest man needs a home to go back to. The recording went on for 20 minutes. She talked about the things she loved, the smell of the air after a rainstorm in Capitol Hill, the way the light hit the cathedral at night, and how she wished she could have seen him one last time. I'm leaving the money to people who need a start, Sam. You've already had yours. I'm leaving you this recording because I want you to hear what you missed. I want you to understand that success isn't a penthouse in Chicago. It's having someone who wants to hear your voice at 2 a.m. just because they love you. You're a rich man, Sam Miller, but you're very, very lonely. I hope this recording helps you find your way back to being a human being. The audio clicked off. Sam looked up. The lobby was full of successful people. Men in $5,000 suits. Women with handbags that cost more than Margaret's car. They were all rushing. They were all too busy. He looked at the baseball glove in the box. He remembered the smell of the grass at Washington Park. He remembered his mother's cheers from the stands. She was always the loudest, always the one with the orange slices and the cold water. In that moment, the American dream Sam had been chasing felt like a nightmare. He had traded his mother's final months for a 3% commission on a condo. He had ignored the only person who truly knew him so he could impress people who wouldn't even attend his funeral. He picked up his phone. He didn't call a client. He didn't check his email. He called Jason. He came to see you too, didn't he? Sam asked when his brother picked up. Jason's voice was hoarse, his usual bravado gone. Yeah, Jason said. He came. What do we do now? Sam asked, his voice breaking. She's gone, Jason. The house is gone. Everything is gone. No, Jason said, and for the first time in years he sounded like the big brother Sam remembered. Everything isn't gone. We still have the boxes. And we have each other. It's time to go home, Sam. Even if the house isn't ours anymore, we need to go back to Denver. The three siblings who hadn't been in the same room for 5 years made their flight arrangements. The lawyer had knocked on their doors, and the sound of that knock had shattered the glass walls they had built around their lives. The air in Denver has a specific clarity to it, a sharpness that demands you breathe deeper. As the three Miller siblings stood on the sidewalk of 12th Avenue in Capitol Hill, that air felt thin and punishing. They stood before the Victorian house that had once been the center of their universe. It looked exactly as it always had. The white trim was crisp, the porch was swept, and the rose bushes were dormant for the winter, tucked under a layer of fresh snow. But the for sale sign was gone. In its place was a small, elegant wooden plaque near the gate. Margaret's house, a sanctuary for teachers. Jason, Chloe, and Sam looked like strangers in their own childhood. Jason was dressed in a sleek black overcoat that cost more than their father's first car. Chloe wore oversized designer sunglasses to hide eyes that had been swollen for days, and Sam gripped the strap of his bag as if he were afraid the ground might open up beneath him. She really did it, Chloe whispered, her voice catching. She really gave it all away. She didn't give it away, Chloe, Jason said, his voice sounding older, heavier. She put it where it would be used. We weren't using it. They walked up the steps, the wood creaking under their feet in a familiar rhythm. The door was opened by a woman they didn't recognize, a young woman in her late 20s with tired eyes but a warm smile. She was holding a stack of books. Can I help you? She asked. We're the Millers, Sam said. We used to live here. The woman's expression shifted from curiosity to a profound, quiet sympathy. Oh, you're Margaret's children. I'm Sarah. I'm one of the first residents here. I'm a first-year middle school teacher. I couldn't afford rent anywhere in the city until this foundation opened up. She stepped aside. Please come in. The lawyer told us you might stop by. Stepping inside was like walking into a memory that had been scrubbed clean. The furniture was different, more functional, more communal, but the soul of the house remained. The smell of cedar and old wax, the way the light hit the stained glass over the door, the height of the ceilings. Sarah led them to the kitchen. She left a note for the house, Sarah said, pointing to a framed piece of paper on the wall where the family calendar used to hang. It wasn't a note for them. It was for the people living there now. To whoever finds rest within these walls. This house was built on love and hard work. It was filled with the noise of children who I hoped would change the world. My wish for you is that you find the peace I found here, and that you never forget that a career is what you do, but a home is who you are. Feed the birds, water the roses, and always call your mother." The three siblings stood in the kitchen, the place where they had eaten 1,000 breakfasts, where Margaret had bandaged scraped knees, and where she had sat alone for so many years waiting for a phone to ring. "I remember sitting right there," Sam said, pointing to a corner of the breakfast nook, "when I got my acceptance letter to UChicago. Mom made pancakes. She was crying because she was so proud, but I thought she was crying because she was going to miss me. I told her to get a grip. I was so arrogant. I told her her house was cluttered," Chloe added, wiping a tear from behind her glasses. "The last time I was here, I told her she needed to modernize. I didn't realize that the clutter was our entire lives. The drawings, the trophies, the things she kept because we wouldn't." They spent the afternoon walking through the rooms. They met two other teachers, young people full of passion and exhaustion, people who spoke of Margaret with a reverence usually reserved for saints. They realized that in her final months, their mother hadn't been a lonely victim. She had become a titan of her community. She had traded the three people who shared her blood for a whole city that shared her heart. As the sun began to dip behind the jagged peaks of the Rocky Mountains, painting the Denver sky in shades of bruised purple and burning orange, the siblings gathered on the back porch. "The lawyer said the rest of the estate is settled," Jason said, looking out the garden where Leo, the neighbor boy, was currently shoveling snow. "The scholarships are funded. The land is protected. We have our boxes, and we have the memories we chose to keep." "It's not enough," Sam said. "It doesn't fix it. We spent 10 years being ungrateful, and we have the rest of our lives to live with it." "No," Jason said, looking at his brother and sister. "That's not the lesson she wanted us to learn. She didn't do this to punish us. She did this to wake us up. Look at us. We're actually talking. We're actually here." Jason reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. For a moment, he looked like he was going to check his stocks or his email. Instead, he powered it off and set it on the porch railing. Chloe and Sam followed suit. 3 expensive pieces of technology sat silent in the cold air. "We can't get her back," Jason said, "but we can stop being the people who ignored her. We can start being the people she thought she was raising." They sat in silence for a long time, watching the stars come out over the mile-high city. The ungrateful children were gone. In their place were 3 adults who finally understood the value of the things that cannot be bought, sold, or branded. They left the house that evening, but they didn't go straight to the airport. They went to a small, quiet cemetery in the foothills. There was no grand monument, just a simple stone next to their fathers. Margaret Miller, teacher, mother. She gave us roots. They didn't leave flowers. They didn't have a speech. They simply stood together, shoulder to shoulder, in the cold mountain air. And for the first time in a decade, the Miller children weren't too busy. They stayed until the moon was high, finally giving their mother the only thing she ever truly wanted from them: their time. The story of Margaret Miller didn't end with a lawyer's knock or a lost inheritance. It began there. It was the story of a mother's final, most difficult lesson: that love is a verb, and that the greatest tragedy isn't losing a fortune, but realizing you had one all along and simply forgot to look at it. As they walked back to their rental car, Jason looked back at the mountains one last time. He felt a strange sense of peace. The silence of Denver didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt like a promise. "See you soon, Mom," he whispered into the wind. And for the first time, he felt like she could actually hear him.